I find that anime and manga age extremely well. A lot of the greatest anime ever made that would be considered timeless classics, I find to truly be unaffected by the passage of time. Even more so when compared to something like video games, for example. Even some of the greatest games ever made, while still holding up gameplay wise, do inevitably end up showing their age with how far technology has come since then. I mean, it's 25 years old, and personally, I can still get excited off Polygon Tifa and her pointy triangles, but the difference between this and her modern day iteration are night and day. And I feel like this problem is something anime very rarely suffers from. You can compare the original Evangelion to the remake it got 20 years later, and the original still holds up. Perfect Blue, GTO, and Cowboy Bebop still look beautiful, all things considered. And that's just for anime. Manga is in its own tier. Take one look at some Vagabond panels or Berserk panels and tell me they don't belong in an art museum. It wouldn't surprise me that even in 100 years, you won't find manga art better than this no matter how far technology advances. The beauty of a timeless classic is being able to experience something for the first time years after it had first come out and make it feel like it had came out today. And I think the real beauty behind all of this is how magical and special a classic can be. Similar to how lightning can never strike the same place twice, you can't hope to recreate the magic that made something truly special one-to-one. And I think the perfect example of this is FLCL, or Fooly Cooly, and how its sequels failed to live up to the original. And FLCL is really that anime. FLCL is the definition of a timeless classic. This anime that is now over 20 years old manages to continue to be relevant and is more unique and memorable than probably 90% of anime that have come out in the past 2 decades. It's been celebrated as one of the greatest anime to ever be produced, and I can only imagine that in another 20 years we'll be having the same conversation about FLCL because nothing like it will ever be created again. It's a truly one-of-a-kind creation. And as someone that's not a super fan of the series who only recently watched it for the first time, I can still appreciate it and understand why so many people adore it as much as they do. This anime is super confusing, and even someone that's seen the thing 10 times might have trouble explaining it. But to me, I would describe FLCL as a blank canvas. This anime is really whatever you want it to be, if that makes sense. If you want to take it at face value, it's probably the most anime than ever. Monsters come out of people's heads, there's a giant iron in the middle of town, they fight using guitars, there's random South Park references, and none of it makes sense. And that's okay. Even if you don't understand what you saw and watching all 6 episodes feels like a fever dream to you, you still get treated to great animation and a banger soundtrack, and you'll weirdly feel happy and satisfied by the time you finish it. If you want the show to have a deeper meaning, it's a story about puberty shown by a horn slightly curved growing out of the main character's head that innocent little me didn't understand what it stood for at first. It's a story about maintaining your individuality and not becoming standardized in a world that wants you to become uniformed, symbolized by this giant iron in the middle of town. It's the anime that keeps on giving. Each time you watch it, you feel like you learn more and more from it. It's the reason people still make analysis videos on this show to this day. They managed to cram so many themes into this short 6-episode anime. There's the overlining message the show is trying to say about fleeting adolescence, but there's also a ton of these characters that cover themes such as maturity, bullying, and putting on a fake persona. It's as deep as you want it to be, or as crazy and nonsensical as you want to make of it. And the reason all of this works is because at the end of the day, the anime is simply fun. It's fun to watch these characters interact with each other. They're also goofy and expressive and so unconventional for many characters when they were created and still to this day. And the reason they're able to reach this almost iconic status is because of the animation of the show. It's not a stretch to say this anime looks better than most anime airing today. It's so creative and experimental in how they go about it. They'll switch styles constantly. Like early on, there's this almost iconic 3D-esque scene where the camera rotates around, and this one scene where they animate manga panels, and they just breathe life into these still images. It's so expressive and makes you think they can jump out of the screen at any moment, and then they do just that. There's also the previously mentioned South Park style switch, and whatever this is called, I don't know. And honestly looks pretty bad, but the point is that it's different. They constantly keep you on your toes through its animation and presentation alone, all while being accompanied by one of the greatest anime soundtracks to ever be conceived. I feel like every review of FLCL probably includes someone gushing for 5 minutes about how good the Pillows is, and that's for good reason, they're amazing. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm not someone that doesn't just listen to video game and anime OSTs all day, because that's exactly what I do. All I'll say is that if Cowboy Bebop is the greatest anime soundtrack with jazz, and Samurai Champloo is the greatest anime soundtrack with hip hop, then FLCL is that, but with rock music. And there really isn't a higher compliment than that. Between the characters, animation, and soundtrack, there's a ton of reasons to fall in love with FLCL, but I think the biggest reason why so many people love this anime is because FLCL doesn't care if you like it or not. This anime screams passion project. You can just feel the people making this anime were having a good time. It's made by people expressing the things they are passionate about, and that passion is able to resonate with you beyond the screen and into your heart. This anime is the perfect example of making something for yourself. This anime is unapologetic. It's extremely weird and nonsensical at times. FLCL doesn't try to appeal to anyone, and because it doesn't try to appeal to anyone, it manages to appeal to everyone. In a world where there are thousands of isekai to watch because anime fans can't seem to stop themselves from watching it no matter how bad they may be, or video game companies trying to make a low-effort battle royale, Call of Duty clone, or mobile game to try and chase a current fad in hopes of striking gold and becoming billionaires, FLCL says screw that. Fooly Cooly says make something you want to make something you're passionate about, because when you put your everything into something you believe in, that's true art. And I think that is one of the coolest messages any piece of media can teach you. And you never know. You might just end up with something that people remember and talk about decades after it's concluded, just like FLCL. Love it or hate it, you can't actually call FLCL mid or forgettable. And that's why I think it's a crying shame that Fooly Cooly received these sequels. Because not only are FLCL progressive and alternative, mid, and forgettable, they're pretty much the exact opposite of what the original was in almost every way. They managed to miss the mark completely and even harm the legacy of the original. I'll call these shows what they effectively are. They're just cash grabs and nostalgia bait. We see this time and time again where people think it's a good idea to revisit something that was really successful and had a great conclusion, only to use the name of that said classic in order to get sales from its old audience, as well as the potential sales with a new audience. This of course sounds great on paper, and isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it actually works out, and the new product manages to be genuinely fantastic. But more often than not, it feels like 90% of these are misses. I'm talking about those live action anime that no one asked for, sequels to something that didn't need to happen only to disappoint, and those reboots of franchises that use the previous name with zero awareness of why people like the original. I hate these a ton because I feel like they actually do harm the legacy that the original leaves behind. Take Psycho Pass for example. The first season was truly brilliant. It has a super interesting premise, very memorable villain, and constantly challenges your morals on what is good or bad. And it somehow managed to do all of this extremely well. It was a very well put together show that could have possibly reached that legendary status. And then season 2 happened and it was just on a whole other level of bad. I remember watching it as it aired weekly and finished all of it regrettably so. And in a couple of years they tried again with a season 3 that I don't even know, but I assume it isn't good. Now when I think of Psycho Pass, I struggle to remember the good parts from the first season that I enjoyed because the follow-up left such a bad taste in my mouth. And personally, I feel like my strength of will is strong enough to resist falling into such obvious baits, but it really is in our human nature to go and see follow-ups and sequels to the things we love despite how bad they may be. But at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, no matter how much you love Cowboy Bebop, if a live-action Cowboy Bebop sounds bad, and if it looks just as bad as you imagined, well then, surprise surprise, the live-action adaptation is bad. So then why do we even feel the need to give it the time of day? They only make these things in the first place because we end up watching them regardless because we need to satisfy our curiosity. And I'm of course part of the problem because I couldn't just walk away after finishing FLCL. Despite hearing the poor reception from fans and watching the reviews online claiming them to be bad and a waste of time, I just had to watch FLCL progressive and alternative. And to maybe no one's surprise, they are bad and a waste of time. But at least in FLCL's defense, they aren't the worst things to ever be produced. There are far, far worse examples of sequels just absolutely taking a stinky dookie on the grave of the original. I think progressive is a bad anime, while alternative is mediocre at best. And opposed to playing a 20-hour game that costs you $60, both these anime are only a little over 2 hours each. But this also means more people, much like myself, will check it out regardless because of the low investment. I think the saving grace for these anime is that the music is still fantastic. They got the Pillows who worked on the original to do the sequels, so it was pretty hard to mess that part up. And they thankfully didn't try and use most of the old cast again for the sequels, but instead focused on brand new characters, with the exception of Haruka, who's the face of the series, to let you know that this is still FLCL. FLCL is this crazy jumbled mess at first, but on a second rewatch, it would reveal itself to be surprisingly deep and complex. If you didn't realize something at first with the symbolism the show was using, you could rewatch the anime and learn something new from it. Or just watch someone's analysis video online like I did in order to understand the deeper meaning. In the sequel series, they treat you like a child. they explain the themes and messages of the show bluntly to your face. There's no deeper meaning here at all, and that's why you'll be hard-pressed to find any analysis content on the sequels because there's simply no need. The show treats you like it's your high school English teacher making you read a chapter of Catcher in the Rye, and they have to spend a whole day explaining to you how deep and meaningful the book actually is. And much like my high school English class, I really don't care. There's so many characters in the original cast of FLCL to like. On a surface level, they were also fun and playful, but they represented very relatable themes such as bullying and acting mature for your age. And despite tripling the number of characters in the series, no one in the sequels manages to come even close to being as likable as the characters in the original. In Progressive's case, it's just so disappointing because they could have done something but didn't. I actually had high hopes going in. In episode 1, they introduced the 3 main leads. I was excited to learn more about the large white guy because, as a large white guy myself, other than the ugly bastard tag, this is probably the closest to physical representation I'm going to get in an anime. This character could have covered themes such as eating disorders, bullying, or depression. I then learned that he wears a skirt to school, so I assumed he would cover themes such as expressing yourself despite your physical appearance and what others may think of you. Then halfway through the series he rents a girlfriend for a day, because his friends think he's a hypervirgin, and this is definitely a massive L, and I really don't know where they were going with this, but maybe they have a plan, and nope. Next thing you know, the credits roll and that's it. He gets no development. He's a loser from start to finish, and I can't help but think to myself, bruh, who greenlit this character? Who thought this was okay? The other friend isn't much better. They tease early on he has Latin blood in him, so I thought he would represent dealing with xenophobia in a society, but nope, he's also just a joke character that didn't need to be included. Instead, Progressive chooses to focus on a romance story, while the overall message of the show is telling us how some things in life we simply can never obtain, and that makes us want to chase after them. No matter what message the show is trying to say, at the end of the day, if the anime is bad, no one will want to hear it. At least in Alternative's case, they try something. The problem being, I don't like a single one of these characters, Haruka included. They try to cover themes such as acting more mature than your age, which were already previously covered over a decade ago in the original and also handled much better there. Each episode left you with a satisfying conclusion. Stuff like Naoto winning the bat and Ninamori revealing her fake glasses helped towards finalizing their character arcs. And in Alternative's case, it's the exact opposite. Each episode leaves you with the feeling of, what is the point? No one really grew from this. Until you see those final credits roll and still ask yourself, what was the point? Why were these even made? I think the most disappointing thing for me was the animation. These anime just look and feel so painfully generic. FLCL was one of the most iconic anime ever made in terms of animation. You could feel the passion and fun in almost every frame. There's just none of that here. The anime feels like no one really believed in what they were working on. The original tried so many different things, and the sequels tried nothing at all. And when they do make callbacks to the original in the form of the manga-style animation, it just feels like a cheap imitation, and sadly, that's what these end up being. Imitations that don't live up to the original. For as bad as FLCL Progressive was, they at least got one thing right. The things in life that we know are impossible to receive, the fact that we know we can't have them, makes us want them all that much more. FLCL is super short, it's only 6 episodes. Most people probably wish the anime was 12 episodes like most other anime, and most people will probably want another 12 on top of that. But the thing is, 6 is all we ever got, and despite them trying to revitalize the series, those original 6 from 20 years ago are really all we'll ever get. You can get the same exact crew who worked on FLCL to try and make the anime again, and it still won't be the same. Fulikuli is a work of art that was made by these people expressing what they love and how they were feeling at that time. Our thoughts and feelings change every week, so something as personal as that you can't possibly hope to recreate. And I feel like now, a timeless classic isn't just something that holds up extremely well years later, but also manages to give you a glimpse of what the creators were inspired by at that time, as well as how they felt while working on their craft. And there's a sense of beauty in that, capturing the moments in our lives that can't be reproduced. Truly a one-of-a-kind creation. In a way, FLCL itself is pretty much the embodiment of this, and that's why it holds such a special place in people's hearts. FLCL captures that feeling everyone has when you're 12 and know nothing about the world and how weird and scary that is, but also how fun and exciting it is. That time in our lives that we can never go back to, that we so desperately wish we can. FLCL truly is something that can never be recreated. You just have to cherish what little of it we got and be grateful for that, because there really will never be another FLCL.